Welcome back. Moving on to our next Fireside now. We're talking about Insurtech and customer centricity with our guest, Tamara M. Zatkowski, who is the Chief Digital Officer at Acrisure. Tamara is responsible for the digital strategy and transformation right across the organization. Tamara, welcome to FinTech Live New York.
Thank you, Alex. Very excited to be here.
Excellent. So we have some fantastic questions already lined up, but if you, our viewers, would like to ask Tamara a question about digital strategy or customer centricity in Insurtech, just put your question in the comments and we will attempt to weave in as many of those as possible during this session. We do only have 30 minutes though, so let's jump right into it. Starting with a fairly basic question, I suppose, but it helps to really understand the foundation of what we're talking about. Tamara, what does customer centricity look like through your eyes?
It's a great question. I think there's a lot of different interpretations ultimately, but I would say in terms of the way you design your organization and the way you design your products, the way you think about your operations, it's really just ensuring that your customer is at the heart of that. And I think collectively, there's a lot of work that goes on, and obviously it's pretty obvious with the product side, so the front of the house. So basically the work that you do on the digital space is very apparent because that is actually what is interacting with the customer majority of the time. But what I would say is where there's significant opportunity across the board is really looking at the depths of the organization. So looking at how you reorganize from an operations perspective, how you align your organization from a structural perspective, and ensuring that that is felt throughout the entire organization. Because it's very easy for the people who are on the front line who are actually interacting with customers to feel that and have that perspective. But those that are kind of several layers removed can also be need to ensure that they essentially have that connective tissue, because if they don't, you start to lose sight of it. And I think that's where a handful of companies fall short and can be limited in terms of their ability to remain customer centric, is ensuring that all teams kind of have that connective tissue and are aligned to it.
And I suppose that's probably easier said than done, really, isn't it? How do insurance organizations go about really embracing this culture of putting customers at the heart of everything that they do?
It's a huge undertaking. So I would say, particularly the larger the organization, the harder it is to do. So historically, the way they're structured, it's typically either by product line and then some sort of servicing components to it. So customers go across those and across several kind of silos that exist in organizations. So I would say fundamentally, from a digital transformation perspective, we obviously think about the technology and what we deliver and how we end up executing that, so the consumers have simple experience and alignment, personalization, et cetera. But it's the more holistic the organization can evolve as it relates to those components is the ultimate opportunity. So the way in which you can reorganize your own organization to collectively align better to consumers is the big thing. So I would say we did that. I came from banking, and so a handful of experiences that we had is there are developers that work in developing technology but have no interaction with consumers. So we would, in this scenario, they would go to the branches and understand how a teller does their job and how they work and how that exchange occurs. It helps ultimately to frame not only the better understanding of like the day-to-day activities and what's happening, but also how you would potentially develop something that it makes a little bit more sense or is more intuitive or ultimately just is aligned a little bit better. So I think the better and more you can allow people to navigate in the organization holistically to better understand like how other people are doing their jobs or how essentially it works, the better you can, like, products you create, but also organizational alignment you can have. So that I would say are some key pieces that we've leveraged that have been helpful.
Okay, excellent. So one of the things we've been talking about today is obviously what we should expect from the evolution of the insurance industry. We've talked about embedded insurance and whether or not that will completely change the way we buy insurance. When you look ahead to the future of insurance, how crucial do you think it will be that organizations are already in a position where they're putting customers right at the heart of their proposition? Do you think that will be essential no matter what happens to the industry?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's a true comparison, right? So we're not comparing ourselves with other insurance companies or even other fintechs. It's truly about, the consumer experience and the truly technical, the truly tech companies are pushing that envelope, and we can't pretend like we can't compare ourselves. We're a consumer product. So the desire and the focus needs to be on comparing ourselves to that environment. Obviously, with the pandemic, and I would say the evolution of mobile and leveraging data, there's people have higher expectations. So there's no reason that you kind of sit back and assume that it is what it is and that's how it will always be. So I think for us, the way we think about it is ensuring that we're meeting our customers at the point of need. So a lot of that embedded activity is really around life events and things that would cause them to need insurance for us, and or just having changes in life status or whatever. So the more that you can create an embedded experience that allows for that to be identification, it makes it easier for them to find you and you to find them. So ultimately, it's a huge piece of how we're thinking about the overall ecosystem and management of it. But it is a key piece to, I think, ultimately the customer experience as well, because it makes it easier for them.
Okay, excellent. This is probably a good juncture to say that if you are listening and you've got a question for Tamara, please do put it in the chat and we will try to get to some of them at the end of the session. In the previous session, we were discussing about how much further insurance organizations have to go at improving the CX and the usability of the apps, the websites, whatever channels it might be that they're developing. But although customer centricity or the CX are really important, we have to make sure that they're ultimately paying dividends, don't we? So how can we make sure that our efforts around customer centricity and putting customers at the heart of what we do, how can we make sure that that leads to tangible improvements in customer loyalty and retention?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's really also aligned to how you develop products and how you ultimately determine that what you created is a success. So I would say a handful of things there. So what we have done, which I think has been continually successful, is there's a massive amount of data, obviously, that gets extracted around any of these transactions and activities. So it's the ability to essentially manage that volume of data, ensure that whatever you built or put out has a feedback loop. So you can identify if it's working, identify if it's not working, and also be able to figure out where you want to tweak things. So it's ensuring that you're in the development, essentially, of the product that you have or you're putting out. The ecosystem of analytics exists around it, and ensuring that that data that you're capturing provides you intelligent information that will ultimately allow you to tweak the product itself and or the experience that the customer has, and also extract the value, because then you can essentially start to see whether it's of greater value versus something else and do some comparisons. So the analytics is really, I would say, the key piece around that piece.
Okay, and I suppose if you're putting customers at the heart of your business anyway, and continuously improving your product proposition, then those returns will naturally come. It's just a case, as you say, of monitoring them and making sure that they're at the level that internal stakeholders are expecting of your business. How important is it when we're talking about customer centricity, building a business around a customer? You have to know who that customer is, don't you? How important is it to understand who you're serving, who your customers are, and what they look like before really we try and solve their problems or cater to their needs?
100%. It's a big, not even a big issue, but more if you truly want to get throughput and you want to get customer alignment and trust, you need to ensure that you understand them. And ultimately, if you're striving for personalization, you need to be able to understand segmentations, right? So it's a key piece to, I would say, ultimately improving your customer experience. But it starts from the beginning. So the way in which we develop and design our marketing campaigns are aligned to targeted audiences and ensuring that, essentially that the message that we're sending resonates with them. If it resonates with them, they respond, and then click-through rates increase. And ultimately, they go through the sales funnel and the process itself, and they interact with sales agents. However, essentially their personalized flow occurs through the process. But the better you understand the customer coming through, the easier it is to meet their needs without them even having to ask for it. It ultimately is like fed to them because you already know enough about either how they've digitally interacted before or just their needs and expectations based on profiles that you either have or third-party data that ultimately provides you greater clarity into those pieces. So it's the more that you can be essentially proactive about the needs and expectations, the easier it is to kind of fulfill it. So the more that you have in terms of data certainly helps navigate that space.
Okay, thanks for business. So how does Acrisure make sure that it differentiates itself from the competition?
I think I caught most of that question, Alex. I'm just going to reiterate it back. How does Acrisure differentiate itself from its competitors? I think there's a handful of very important themes. Acrisure, in terms of history and a little bit of background, has grown substantially over the last 10 years, particularly through acquisition. And part of that strategy was very focused in terms of identifying brokerage firms and acquiring them. And a lot of the, I would say, cultural elements are key to it. So it has grown through acquisition, as I mentioned, and very entrepreneurial in spirit. So the desire to ensure that even though you've been part of a larger family, you also still have an individual identity, and in allowing that to still maintain and keep people operating and managing their organizations the way that works and has worked. We're certainly evolving that, and there's alignment as it relates to technology and as it relates to operations and some of the back office components to that, obviously to improve in terms of scale. But the culture and the alignment on those elements is really a key piece to, I would say, what has driven Acrisure as a whole. Because I mean, the people are the things that are the differentiator in the end. We've done a significant amount of work, obviously, continue to cultivate that and improve how we've come together and how we make that connected components. The other, I would say, key piece is obviously from a technology perspective. We have a very large data science and AI team, over 100 engineers, essentially leveraging the best technologies that we can. So we've gone through our own, acquisitions, and from a handful of Insurtech, so we purchased to essentially fill our technology suite that we know we had gaps and opportunities in, and then we've built a handful of things as well. We'll continue to build in that space, but I would say, a lot of what we do from a technology perspective is to look at where there's opportunities in the market, where it is most of value for us to build versus leverage things that already exist. And optimize it to the way that we need it. So I would say those are the two kind of key pieces that are differentiators. It's really that culture and that drive, and it's a very fast-paced organization. There's always something new coming up down the pike, but ultimately it's also leveraging that technology and being strategic and thoughtful about the way in which we implement it, and also strategic about the way we purchase and or acquire other companies to ensure that we're continue to progress and stay ahead of it all.
Okay, excellent. We asked the previous panelists for their judgment on the industry, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to do the same. How do you assess the state of the industry? How well are we doing at putting customers at the heart of insurance product propositions? Are we completely failing, or are we doing better than we usually give us credit for?
I wouldn't say it's a complete failure, because I don't think, I think the intent is there. It's just, these are large organizations with well-established kind of operations. Acrisure is slightly unique because of its kind of acquisition strategy and the way that it's been built and put together. But those that have kind of built from the ground up and just kind of organically grown, it is hard to navigate and transition those organizations to be much more customer centric. Banking is similar. They're in a slightly, I would say, more progressive space because they've been required to, because there's such a strong interaction with consumers. People want to have access to their money. So the demands are certainly there. Insurance is a slightly different interaction model because it's infrequent contact unless there's something that usually fails or goes wrong. So for the most part, it kind of left untouched. So the expectations have been slightly lower. So I suspect that's part of the lag. I also suspect part of the industry, it's kind of risk averse by definition. So I think there's some realistic reasons why it may be a little bit behind. But I would say there's a ton of activity happening as it relates to Insurtech, as it relates to the utility of the data. I mean, similar to finance, it was one of the first adopters of technology. So the volume of data that exists in these organizations is massive. Being able to extract it and utilize it in a way that is valuable to the organization and customers, is still a significant amount of work just based off of the way it's been structured and historically kind of pulled together. But the reality is there's a significant amount of opportunity, and I think everyone sees it. And I think the challenge is just putting the pieces together and a roadmap that to effectively execute on it. And I think some have had more success than others. We can obviously look to the Insurtechs from a customer-centric and or development lens. Like they certainly have been able to progress in terms of the UX and UI, and they are pushing the envelope and ensuring that the rest of us are kind of collectively moving forward. But it is a large undertaking, and doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't mean obviously we shouldn't keep moving and working towards it. But the reality is it's not as easy because it's a much larger undertaking than it is to kind of evolve a much smaller startup. So.
Okay, thank you. I think that was a very diplomatic answer. I like the fact that you began with it's not a complete failure, a partial failure probably, but not a complete one. That's good to know.
There you go.
From a consumer perspective, there's obviously a lot of different things that they value. They value, price. They value the comprehensiveness of coverage. They value the convenience of where they can buy insurance. Do you have any sort of sense about the interplay between those different selling points? Which insurers should focus more on, which they should prioritize? How should insurance organizations know where their focus needs to be?
We've found, and there are, I would say, varying different kind of like profiles, but the price matters. I mean, similar to the airline industry, the way they've segmented essentially ticket sales is similar. People do care about price. There's this price sensitivity specifically related to that. Where I think there's some differentiation is quality, obviously. In the airline, for the most part, you can kind of get to where you want to be. Some are more comfortable than others, but ultimately you arrive at your destination. From an insurance perspective, there is a kind of value for your dollar that does matter. And I think as brokers, like ultimately our job is to ensure that we get them the best price for the essentially best product. And there's a lot of work that goes on the back end from an analytics perspective to be able to align to that, because the best product varies, right? Some people need certain things, and there's components of it that are not always easily identified or transparent. So identifying the appropriate product and ensuring that you understand the needs of either a single consumer or a small business or whatever ends up being the individual. It's critical to ultimately aligning to the right product. So to me, ultimately, there's a lot of work that goes into that, but that is really the area of focus for us, certainly.
Okay, we're in a time right now in the insurance industry where there's a lot of digital transformation going on. Do you have any thoughts about sort of how insurance organizations can manage that? Does digital transformation go hand in hand with fostering a customer-centric culture? Is it vitally necessary to have digital transformation in order to do that? Or do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. I mean, I think it's the means ultimately of creating customer centricity. You can go through a large-scale transformation or restructuring, I guess, without focusing on anything digital, but it's probably fruitless because the reality is, even if you just did essentially operations and back office, your automation is digital. Like everything you do to gain efficiency in the back end ultimately provides better customer experience in the front end. Because if servicing agents aren't focused ultimately on copying, pasting, and doing things inefficiently, they have certainly more time and I would say brain power to focus on kind of customer needs. So the reality of essentially becoming customer centric without any sort of digital transformation seems pretty challenging. I suppose anything's possible, but no, I would say it's mainly the means I think that everyone is leveraging and utilizing in order to kind of move forward and progress, particularly in that topic.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned the difference between some airlines being better than others. If I can ask you, do you look at the insurance industry from time to time through a consumer's lens as well? Do you see things that you just utterly can't understand why insurance organizations are doing things that way, or things that annoy you, or perhaps things that really sort of uplift you?
Yes, I definitely do. I probably wasn't as attuned to it prior to coming into the insurance industry, but certainly more now. And I think actually in the previous call, they kind of talked about this. The continued belief that a servicing center or call center, you can just go from silo to silo to silo and have to continue to repeat your request or message. I think the evolution, which I think ultimately everyone's obviously, like I said, like very focused on the front end experience and the exchange that happens with the consumer. And I think everyone oftentimes equates that to be the digital transformation. And that's really just the kind of icing on the cake ultimately. And it's the depth of the organization that truly needs the digital transformation. So if you can, and it's what we're doing as well, from a servicing perspective, all of our agents are, developing and accessing digital tools and have the ability to leverage much more efficient and streamlined technology than the average, I would say, call center. So I think the experience, it's important for you to have a human experience related to the industry that you're in and the activities that you are doing. So not only is it important just because ultimately you better understand the things that you need to fix, but also remember, like, oh, this is annoying, this is frustrating, and you don't want to do those things to other people. And so, yeah, I think really for me, the focus is, I don't think it's the easy stuff is the technology, because it's not. There's certainly a certain amount of complexity as it relates to, connecting with the carriers and connecting with the brokers and ensuring you're asking the right questions and storing the data appropriately and all that good stuff. But the operations and the behind the scenes, so I would say the less sexy stuff, is really the key to ensuring that you're evolving and truly becoming digital. And it's not just, again, your consumers interacting with you digitally, but it's the operations you have and the servicing agents operating digitally and having that perspective and alignment overall.
I suppose it's important to remember that no matter how fast digitization goes, each customer is different. Each customer is going to have their own preferences. Some customers are going to want to get in touch with you via web chat. Some customers are going to want to get in touch with you via phone. There's probably even a small minority who still want to use postal communication. So it's just about bearing in mind, I suppose, that each customer is different, but no matter what you do, make sure whatever the touch point is, you understand who your customer is and you're not making them jump through unnecessary hoops to get service off you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the dynamic that you need to create. Is there's a variety of different communication channels and connective, like I said earlier, connective tissue that you ultimately have with a consumer. And they all have preferences, and they all prefer to, like, I prefer to text as opposed to call half the time because it's just easier for me and I can do it when I have time to do it. And so figuring out how to meet your customers where they're at in terms of their own digital experience and desire is important. But also being able to ensure that you have the flexibility in your operations to handle that. It's also key because, again, there's a significant amount of data that is extracted and captured through all those exchanges. So ensuring that all of that kind of comes through in a centralized analytics is a critical piece to not only maintaining and understanding your customer, but also leveraging and building out better connection.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. It's a really interesting discussion, and one I'm sure that we could both talk about for much longer, but unfortunately we're going to have to wrap it up because we are running out of time. Thank you so much, Tamara, for joining us. We do have another networking break now, so please do stay with us.
Thank you, Alex.